Um, so with that, I'm going to hand the microphone over to the co-chair Brenda Lopez, who will introduce our next speaker.
Thank you, Julie. I just want to remind everyone who speaks to speak like very closely to the microphone because the people online are having a hard time hearing us. But hello everyone, I'm Brenda, she, they pronouns. I'm from Los Angeles, currently in Cleveland, one of the founders of the LA-US Hands-Off Cuba Committee, one of the co-chairs today. And today I have the pleasure of introducing a great friend of Cuba and the Cuba Solidarity work that we do here, and that's Carlos Lasso. Carlos Lasso is a Cuban-American activist for the lifting of the blockade to Cuba. Lasso is also a decorated combat medic, veteran of the Iraq War. Additionally, Lasso has been fighting for the improvement of the relationships between Cuba and the U.S. for the last 20 years. Lasso is a high school teacher and a founder of the movements of Bridges of Love. Please, round of applause for Carlos.
Dear, it is a great honor to be here today, raising our voices once again for the lifting of the blockade, the embargo, or whatever you want to call this economic war that the United States imposed on the Cuban people. As a Cuban American, I am part of that growing sector in our community who put to the side religious creeds and ideologies and want the lifting of the blockade and want to build bridges of love between the people of Cuba, the United States, and all people around the world. During more than 4 years, Puentes de Amor has organized and participated in caravans and events in the United States, in cities around the world, to bring awareness about the need to end these criminal policies that asphyxiate the Cuban families. During more than 4 years, every last Sunday of the month, we have raised our voices asking the United States government to listen to Americans and to listen to the people of the world, the United Nations, and lift the blockade. In the past, we have come in partnership, brotherhood, sisterhood with other groups and organizations and people in the US and bring medications, syringes, powdered milk, and medical resources to hospitals in Cuba. Between humanitarian help and caravans, we have been part of a movement of solidarity that keeps growing, a movement that is healthy and full of hopes. To all those people, I want to say thank you. Today, besides talking about who we are and what we do, I want to tell you a story. I never thought that I would be here today, talking to you, united with you and fighting for this humane cause. I was born in Cuba 60 years ago. My father was a communist, a humble cigar maker who supported the Cuban government. My mother was a housewife who hated the Cuban government. She left Cuba in 1980 when I was 15 years old. Both my parents were decent and loving people. I came to the United States in 1991 when I was 27. Before leaving Cuba, I spent a year in prison for trying to escape from the island in a raft. The second attempt was successful, and after 4 days in the ocean, I finally was rescued by the US Coast Guard 6 miles from Key West. Behind, I left 2 children and part of my family. I brought with me a lot of anger and resentment. I was anti-communist and opposed the Cuban government. In the US, I did what many immigrants do. I work and try to help the family I created here and also help those I left behind. Years later, I joined the Washington National Guard. I became a combat medic. In 2003, I was sent to Iraq. There, I received a Bronze Star for saving the life of American soldiers and Iraqi civilians trapped in the conflict. While I was in the war, something happened. The experience of mutilated bodies and death changed my perspective about life and renewed it. Warfare that was killing innocent Cuban people. I realized that the blockade was a war, a silent war that targeted Cuban families, and I could not support that any longer. That made me change and join those who want to end the war against Cuba. Today, I am a teacher. I have taken my American students to Cuba. I have seen with my own eyes Cubans and American children singing and laughing together. Also, after these years, I have come to the conclusion that the blockade is not just about politics, but about human decency. To oppose the war on Cuba, you don't have to be a communist like my father. You don't have to be anti-communist like my mother. To fight against the blockade, all that takes is to be a decent human being. The embargo is indecent. And and decent for all those who immigrate to the United States is by building bridges of love between our native and our adoptive countries. For me, it's about bringing together my mother, Cuba, and my father, the United States. We have a vision, and we also have a dream. We believe that the blockade should be lifted, can be lifted, and it will be lifted. We believe in that dream because I have imagined that world without blockade when I have seen my American students and my Cuban children playing together. Yes. We also believe that to achieve that, we need to support the support of every decent person in the US and in the world. The blockade is immoral. Therefore, any man and woman of goodwill united by decency, humanity, and love should fight for the end of it. It doesn't matter if you are Republican, Democrat, Independent. It doesn't matter if you are Catholic or Christian, Jewish or Muslim. If you are a decent person, you cannot support the inclusion of Cuba in the list of terrorist countries. The inclusion of Cuba in that list is unjust and denies resources to the Cuban people. If you are a decent person, you cannot support this blockade that starved Cuba. If you are a decent person, you cannot support policies that kill Cuban children. One day, the blockade will be gone. One day we will look back and see that all these years of hate, hostility, aggression against the Cuban people will be something of the past. But for that to happen, we need to fight today with a certainty that we are going to win. We need to fight every day. We need to put to the side our difference, whatever they are, and get united by our values of decency and by our love to family and humanity. We will do it because it's the right thing to do. We will do it because it's the best we can do to serve our countries. We will do it because it's the best tribute that we can offer to our parents and the best gift we can present to future generations. Brothers and sisters, a better world is possible. Let's lift the blockade. The Cuban families and the Cuban and American people rely in our decency and humanity. Thanks. God bless everyone. May God bless Cuba, the United States, the world, and let's say together, Cuba sí, bloqueo, Cuba sí.
We're having some, I think, problems with, the visual and audio.
Just sitting over here.
Yeah, so it's stream, yeah, I'll reach, to the podium. Please, so. Our next speaker, well, thank you so much, Carlos, for those words, that was, very moving. Our next speaker is. He's pretty well known, in Chicago and around the country. Jose Lopez is the executive director of the Puerto Rican Cultural Center. And he's a lecturer at a number of colleges in Northeast Illinois, USC and Columbia. Jose is a leading voice in the independence movement for Puerto Rico, and he reminds us all of the shared history of colonial exploitation of Cuba and Puerto Rico, and the connection between Puerto Rico's aspiration for national independence, Cuba's 60-plus-year battle to defend its right for national sovereignty and to defend its revolution. But he has been unwilling in his opposition to U.S. economic and political war on Cuba, and he is a strong voice and a friend of Cuba and the solidarity in Cuba. So let's welcome.
Thank you so much for this event, and Carlos, thank you for that amazing message that you sent all of us. It's something really important that we have to understand. You cannot understand what's happening in Cuba, what's happening in Nicaragua, what's happening in Venezuela, and what's happening in Puerto Rico. You cannot understand the so-called migrant crisis in the United States unless you're able to understand that everything that happens on this continent is a result of the open veins of Latin America. And that began in 1823, when Simón Bolívar convened the nations of Latin America to come together in the Congress of Panama and to unite against what he called the Great Colossus. And in 1823, the United States' immediate response to the convening of the Congress of Panama was the creation and the imposition of the Monroe Act. 201 years later, that is exactly what we are experiencing, the harvest of empire. So, and those are the words of Juan Gonzalez, our great and amazing journalist. In discussing Latin America and the Latinos in the United States, it's important to be able to understand that, because if we don't understand it, we really cannot understand what is happening right now. Puerto Rico has been a direct colony of the United States since 1898. At the same time that Cuba is taken also by the United States, that the Philippines and that Guam are taken as prisoners of war of the so-called Spanish-American War, which was nothing else than an imperialist design war, and driven by a madman that many people consider one of the great presidents of the United States, Theodore Roosevelt. So I want you to at least understand that for us in Puerto Rico to talk about Cuba and to talk about what the US is doing to Cuba is also to make a direct correlation to the US colonial presence in Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico, the legal system of the United States was changed because the Cubans were able to get a little bit away from the United States in 1902 with the Plot Amendment, but the Plot Amendment says we can intervene. It was almost what is known as the Roosevelt corollary. We can intervene in Cuban affairs whenever we want to. And that's what that ended. It ended that colonial practice. And it is because Cuba ended that colonial practice that the United States has punished Cuba to this day with this incredible, I believe, crime against humanity of the blockade and declaring Cuba a terrorist fostering state. It's important to understand that what happened to Puerto Rico obviously didn't necessarily happen to Cuba because of the Roosevelt corollary, but we were immediately assigned to the same that the Native Americans in this country had been assigned that was clearly defined in 1838 by Judge Marshall in Cherokee versus the Cherokee Nation versus the state of Georgia, and established that indigenous people in this country were not to be treated as a foreign country, nor as domestic. They were to be treated somewhere in between. And that policy was then implemented in Puerto Rico with what came to be known as a territorial clause. And to this day, Puerto Rico, Guam, Samoa, the Virgin Islands, Northern Mariana are ruled by these insidious laws that create a separate system of legality in relationship to those areas. Puerto Rico, in 1922, the US Supreme Court declared Puerto Rico belongs to, it's not a part of the United States, meaning we are a piece of property of the United States. The United States can do whatever it wants with us, and in 2017, it imposed an amazing act called the Promesa Act, which is one of those organic acts that the Congress of the United States can undertake at any point and upheld by the insular cases, because the Belsen versus the people of Puerto Rico of 1922 that declared Puerto Rico belongs to, but is not a part of the United States, is one of those insular cases. And they're extra legal rule of Puerto Rico. And that was done because we were considered a mangrove nation. We were considered a mangrove people. Never ever hoped to be part of the United States. But in 1917, the US decided for another organic act that Puerto Ricans should be made citizens. But it gave Puerto Ricans in Puerto Rico two rights. The right to leave Puerto Rico without papers. That's why you got 5.6 million Puerto Ricans in the United States today, and there are only 3.2 million Puerto Ricans in Puerto Rico. And the right to die for the United States in every war since 1917. So those are the two rights that we were given. That's not any form of democratic rule. When the US talks about invasions and the invasion of the Ukraine, well, let's talk about the US invasion of Puerto Rico with 16,000 troops in 1898, which has now ended. And let's talk about what the US has done with Cuba since 1961 in order to contain the only country in Latin America who has truly challenged US colonialism despite all the obstacles. And my, my, what I want to say is very personal, because for me, Cuba is without a doubt our greatest defender. About 10 years ago, I had the privilege and honor to visit Cuba. And I was met by Ricardo Alegría. Ricardo Alegría was the foreign minister of Cuba, and then he became the head of the Popular Assemblies of Cuba. And Ricardo Alegría, I mean, I was so moved because he came to a house in Old Havana. There are all these places that are embassies of foreign countries, where Puerto Rico has no embassy. But in Cuba, we have La Misión de Puerto Rico, which means we have what the Cubans would consider an embassy. And so I was there and I was waiting for Ricardo to come, and all of a sudden, this man drives with his little car with no bodyguards, with no one. He had just come from the airport. He was in El Salvador and he came to meet with me. And it was a wonderful, wonderful meeting for about 5 hours. But I want to relate this to you because it was obviously we were talking about my brother who was a political prisoner in the United States, and he was in prison with one of the Cuban Five. So we were trying to sort of figure out how we deal with this. And when he was ambassador to the United Nations, he said, every time I would visit Fidel, before I would say goodbye to him, every night that I would visit him, he would tell me, don't forget about Puerto Rico. And he told him, I am the last person on earth who believes in the independence of Puerto Rico. There will be an independence. And to me, that's such a powerful message, because in this program right here, you have an amazing quote from Diaz-Canel. Solidarity only recognizes human needs and demands, and places those who give and receive it in the highest echelon of our species. Solidarity will continue to be an indestructible weapon of struggle, and at the same time, a permanent and inexhaustible message of peace that cannot be silenced. There will really not be, I believe, the freeing of Nelson Mandela and the end of apartheid in South Africa without Cuban solidarity. Probably, if we look across the world and we see what the Cubans have done in terms of education, in terms of healthcare, solidarity has been at a level where no one has ever demonstrated, because the Cubans demand nothing for the solidarity, just as Fidel made that expression to Ricardo Alegría. So I am here to call on the US to end that horrible blockade and to take Cuba out of the list of advocates of terrorism, and most importantly, to open up Cuba completely, where Cuban people can have, they don't have to go through the experience that Carlos went through and so many Cubans having to risk their lives. Because in actual fact, the United States undertaken a practice and a policy that this is our backyard. That's what the Monroe Doctrine says. We need to change and say the United States has to treat all of Latin America as our neighbors and as our friends and as our brothers and sisters, and more importantly, be able to return some of that wealth that it has taken through the open veins of Latin America. And it means that we have to be able to reconcile and be able to tell people that if you want free trade in the America, you must have a free flow of people across this continent. Thank you very much.
For those people who trickled in a little late, online or in person, that was Jose Lopez, the Executive Director of the Puerto Rican Cultural Center. Up next, I'm gonna introduce our co-host online. Allison and I have been on probably now hundreds of webinars together for Cuba. And Allison Boutin is the organizer with Friends of Cuba Against the U.S. Blockade Vancouver and the Fire This Time Movement for Social Justice. Allison is also an organizer with the U.S. Cuba Normalization Conference Coalition. Thank you so much for helping us online, Allison. The floor is yours.
Hello to everyone gathered for the Democratic National Convention in Chicago. We've, of course, been watching from afar and wish that we could stand by with you in putting pressure on the Democratic Party for causes such as ending the blockade of Cuba and taking Cuba off the list of state sponsors of terrorism, both of which have continued under bipartisan administrations, as we know, for more than 60 years. So I'm here today for a special introduction for a video. And I just want to say a big thank you to everyone that is joining us online and in person for dealing with this hybrid environment. As one guest mentioned, we don't have professional level, CNN equipment. It's very expensive. So we're dealing with what we have and are grateful to the Union Hall for giving us their technology and to everyone here that's dealing with the less than ideal conditions. But it's been a great event so far. And thank you to Chicago for pulling this together and inviting people that couldn't travel to join in. As we know, the government of Cuba has been side by side with the people of Palestine in their struggle against Israeli occupation and for liberation since the Cuban Revolution in 1959. Under the current Israeli genocide, we've seen Miguel Diaz-Canel, the president of Cuba, wearing a kufiya at any of his public and large events that take place across the island and international gatherings, showing once again his solidarity. The government of Cuba standing with the people of Palestine at this critical time as they fight against a brutal Israeli genocide and siege on Gaza. Beyond just statements and words and working with people internationally and governments internationally to push for a ceasefire, the government of Cuba also actively demonstrates their solidarity through the Latin American School of Medicine. The Latin American School of Medicine trains doctors in Cuba for free, and it currently hosts, as of January, around 250 Palestinian students who are training to be doctors in Cuba, as I said, for free, so they can return home and serve, whether it's in the West Bank or Gaza, serve the people of Palestine. They become doctors of humanity, as many of us had the experience to know in traveling to Cuba. And this is an excellent example of Cuba's commitment to internationalism, some of which Jose was also referring to in his talk. So I have the honor of introducing a video featuring the words of one of these Cuban students studying at the Latin American School of Medicine. Murid Abu Qatar has some words he would like to share today. I will also mention that we wanted to have him live. He was happy to participate live and share his experience as a Palestinian student in Cuba, But because of the US blockade, we haven't been able to connect Zoom, the platform that we're using now, to people in Cuba in most cases. So we are unable to speak to him live and have that people-to-people exchange due to this criminal and cruel US policy that we are all here to fight against. So I'm gonna show the video now. Again, this is Murid Abu Qatar speaking from Cuba.
Me llamo Morid Aboukater, soy palestino, estudiante de medicina sexto año aquí en Cuba. Soy de Franja de Gaza. Yo llegué a Cuba en el 2017, ya llevo 6 años completos aquí en Cuba, sin volver a mi país, sin volver a ver mi familia. Yo vengo aquí por una beca regalada de Cuba, que Cuba cada año da muchas oportunidades a los estudiantes palestinos para venir aquí a estudiar medicina gratis completamente y para formarlos en médicos para que vuelvan a Palestina para apoyar al pueblo palestino, a nuestro pueblo en su lucha. Cuba siempre apoya a Palestina en todo el lado, diplomáticamente y también en los recursos que tiene Cuba. Cuba comparte los recursos que tiene con otros países que necesitan parte que es Palestina, y en la manera de, como dijimos, que invita a estudiantes palestinos a estudiar en sus universidades y en sus hospitales para ser médicos, y eso todo es gratis. Y aquí en la Escuela Latinoamericana de Medicina hay más de 94 países diferentes que estudian medicina gratis. En Gaza, después de 9 meses de esta guerra, de este genocidio que está pasando en la Franja de Gaza, y también la guerra no solo en la Franja de Gaza, también en Cisjordania, el sistema de salud en toda Palestina está caída, especialmente en Franja de Gaza. El sistema de salud completamente, que ya casi los hospitales no funcionan, no hay operaciones, no hay anestesia para hacer operaciones, para hacer cirugías, para salvar vidas. Entonces, esto afecta mucho al pueblo palestino, a los civiles que se quedan heridos por las bombas y por las bombas tiradas de los aviones israelitas. El sistema de salud de Franja de Gaza necesita mucho apoyo de muchos países de afuera, de la humanidad del mundo, porque eso si sigue así, el pueblo palestino se va a afectar demasiado más lo que está pasando ahora. Eso necesita, el pueblo palestino en Franja de Gaza necesita salvarlo. Mi familia vive en Franja de Gaza y ha sufrido mucho durante estos 9 meses como el resto del pueblo palestino que está en Franja de Gaza. Especialmente el miércoles a las 4 de la mañana aquí en Cuba, me llamó mi primo para decirme que bombardearon mi casa o bombardearon el resto de mi casa, porque mi casa fue bombardeada hace 4 meses y se quedó un parte de la casa donde sigue viviendo mi familia para no estar en la calle. Ellos volvieron otra vez el miércoles a bombardear la casa y gracias a Dios que mi familia no estaba ahí, pero mi papá sí estaba ahí y se quedó herido, que tenía heridas muy graves, y lo llevaron al hospital. Y esto para decirte que el sistema está caída. Él quedó 4 horas sangrando porque no hay recursos, no hay operación donde puede entrarse para parar estas heridas y hacer lo necesario que necesita. Y hasta camas, no había camas, y él estaba en el piso, tirado en el piso, esperando que vacía otra cama de otro paciente, de pronto se va para hacer la operación. Eso es que dice que el sistema de salud en Franja de Gaza completamente caída, que ya los hospitales no sirven. La mayoría de los hospitales fueron bombardeados y los hospitales que quedan no tienen recursos de medicina y ni tienen electricidad porque ya la gasolina, cortaron la gasolina, cortaron agua, el internet, no hay nada en Franja de Gaza. Eso que dice hacer la llamada a todo el mundo, a las humanidades del mundo, a salvar al pueblo palestino en Franja de Gaza. El bloqueo sobre Cuba es un bloqueo contra la humanidad. Es un bloqueo que evita la libertad en esta tierra. Este bloqueo afecta demasiado al pueblo cubano. Como yo soy estudiante de medicina sexto año, que estoy rotando en muchos hospitales, en los hospitales casi no hay nada, no hay medicamentos. Nosotros estamos tratando al paciente solo por lo básico y después para indicarle medicamentos, que no hay medicamentos para darle que están en el hospital y el paciente sale a la calle buscando a alguien que viva afuera para que le mande este medicamento con alguien que viene a Cuba. Entonces este bloqueo está demasiado, es un bloqueo criminal. Es un bloqueo criminal porque está acabando muchas vidas que están aquí, que necesitan medicamentos, pero que no hay porque no entran nada de afuera por el bloqueo que lo ponen arriba del gobierno el cubano. Entonces, estas ayudas que ustedes lo que están haciendo para Cuba es demasiado grande. Y seguro que el pueblo cubano está muy agradecido a apoyarlos. Y como yo estoy aquí desde 6 años, yo sé cómo el pueblo cubano está sufriendo por la falta de medicamentos que tiene. Entonces, esta ayuda es muy necesaria para salvar al pueblo cubano por este bloqueo. Ustedes no pueden imaginar la ayuda que están haciendo a Cuba. Esto ustedes lo ven es pequeño, pero el efecto es muy grande. Ustedes están ayudando mucho a muchos pacientes que están sufriendo aquí en Cuba por no encontrar muchas cosas de medicina ni medicamentos que le pueden salvar su vida. Y yo he visto mucha gente aquí en Cuba sufren demasiado por falta de medicamentos y buscan cualquier manera de encontrar a alguien de afuera para comprarlo de afuera y traerlo a Cuba. ¿Por qué? Porque este bloqueo evita nada que el gobierno traiga cosas de afuera para el pueblo cubano. Entonces ustedes hacen mucho para el pueblo cubano y deben estar orgullosos de lo que están haciendo. El pueblo cubano, repito, está muy agradecido por lo que están haciendo y muchas gracias por todo lo que están haciendo aquí a Cuba.
Oh, thank you so much, Allison, for playing Marie's video for us. Up next, I'm gonna introduce one of our local Chicago Cuba Commission people. Maggie Savid is a Cuban-American journalist living in Chicago. She recently wrote a story about the history of Chicago's Cuban community. In her spare time, she loves salsa dancing and rock climbing. Please give Maggie a warm welcome.
Thank you so much, Brenda. Yes, I'm Maggie. I live here in Chicago and I'm Cuban American on my dad's side. The last time that I was in Cuba was last spring. I went with two Cuban American friends, one was and we, on one of our first days, we were walking around and we just met this older woman and I started talking to her. And it had been a few years since I'd been back to Cuba. And I was really shocked by how much things had changed, by just how desperate the situation was. And she was telling me what life is like for her and her community. She was saying, you know, for the infants, when they get sick, there's no medicine for them. And for elderly folks, there's no medical supplies either. And finally, she just looked at me and said, Esta es una isla de nada. This is an island of nothing. And that's why so many people are leaving if they can. And
those words just really, they really stuck with me. And it still makes me kind of emotional. It's just so angry because things do not have to be this way. The blockade and Cuba being on the SSOT list, it has huge repercussions for people like this woman and her community. And it goes so far beyond just trade with the US, as many of us here know, it has huge repercussions. And as we all continue to fight against these unjust policies, in the meantime, there are these grassroots efforts to get supplies to Cuba where they can, including the incredible work Carlos talked about today. And so I am here to talk to you about one of those efforts. You may have heard about this pacemaker campaign from Global Health Partners. They've done incredible work. They've so far brought 330 pacemakers to Cuba. That's a life-saving medical intervention for people, and they're on track to have brought 500 by the end of the year. So there will be places to donate. I'm not sure exactly where. Over by Brenda over there. And if you do decide to donate, you can really know that that money is going to make a direct material impact on someone's life in Cuba. Many of them are even elders. And regardless of whether you give today, I really encourage you to seek out these mutual aid efforts happening, bringing these, in many cases, life-saving supplies to Cuba. We all work to undo the policies that got us to this place and are keeping us here. And moreover, you can also sign up today if you're interested to get involved with the Chicago Cuba Coalition. We're building a movement. We need you. And I'm actually someone who got involved very recently, and I can tell you I felt very welcome with open arms and really able to plug in right away. So I really encourage you to get involved in whatever way you can, because we truly need you. Thank you so much.
There are these little QR codes on these blue sheets that if people don't have cash with them, you can take that QR code with you and basically kind of go through the website and do a online contribution. So so our next speaker, I'm really proud to say that he's worked with Cuba Coalition for some years. He's a very strong and loyal supporter of Cuba. Byron Cicho Lopez is the elder person of the 25th board, which is a largely Mexican American community. Byron demonstrates work in his class solidarity frequently. I see him all the time on picket lines, whether it's at SEIU picket lines or nurses are on strike at their picket lines. Byron's there. And he's also been a real strong supporter when he's been at demonstrations around Palestine. So I want to thank Byron for his consistent support to be part of this campaign at end of U.S. blockade of Cuba, and welcome, please welcome Byron.
Thank you, Julie, and thank you everybody for being here tonight. We are long and glad to be part of this important panel. I appreciate the remarks in terms of the historical analysis, but also the urgent need to end the blockade. And it's not going to happen without organizing here. So I really want to put into context, now that we're having the Democratic National Convention here in Chicago, that we live in a state of propaganda when on one end you hear the rhetoric changes, but not a change foreign policy and the actions that follow. So it's important to also understand the courage and dignity of the Cuban community. Cubans having an example of international solidarity ever since the Cuban Revolution. And I think that is why, unfortunately, for our own policies, we continue to suffocate an example of integrity and solidarity. Chairman Fred Hampton here in Chicago said it well. I think the way for us forward must be with solidarity, local and international. And I said that because right now, as we see a genocide being played on live TV, and at the same time, we hear a change on the ticket in the Democratic Party, but the continuing of the same policies. The Cuban Revolution and the Cuban and Cubans are an example of solidarity. Actually, it was the Cuban government that sent troops to fight Afro-Pan American solidarity, and they paid with their own lives. 2,400 Cubans died in the name of solidarity to bring down the South African. And I think that international solidarity reminds us that also that have to be followed here at home with actions, not with words. And it is clear that right now, our Cuban brothers, sisters, and siblings need our actions as well as our rhetoric. The Cuban Revolution and in Latin America, I think that we cannot talk about Cuba without talking about imperialism. We cannot talk about Cuba without talking about the embargo, because then you lose the history behind it. And that's why, as someone that came here at 17 years, understanding how the Monroe Doctrine and Operación Condor really destabilize entire nations for profit, for greed, for power. And we continue to see that today. We have Jose Lopez Gaetano, and the DNC is not only that we are not even talking about these issues. The Puerto Rican community, a community that is large in numbers in our city and many other municipalities. Another important effort that must be done to make sure that we have self-determination in Puerto Rico has not even been allowed to have space in the DNC. So how can we talk about a big tent? If we're not talking about issues that are important to the American public. And I'll be very clear with that, because we see the propaganda and the media portraying today the Cuban government and Cubans as terrorists. Look at exactly what's happening with our brothers and sisters and siblings in Palestine. So our futures are intertwined. And it is important that we understand that in Latin America, and people across the world, I think, don't fly their own homes because they want to, but because they're being suffocated. They are suffocated, they're being strangled as we speak. And when we see it in our own communities, I mean, talk about everybody, especially some reactions, a lot of victim blaming. When we see 45,000 people now coming to our city, we hear people say, well, why people have left their homes, why we have people in police stations until not too long ago. So we gotta wonder what happened to the country of origin, like this. And we look at the rhetoric of then now, Trump is a fastest that he's spoken about it. He said it publicly that this had nothing to do with democracy, this was about oil. And that's what oil was about, and continues to be about. And these are policies that not only are harmful, they're harmful for our own communities. If we're allowing fascist regimes to basically make up their own facts. But because the facts are also dubious in the Democratic Party, then we have almost tied. And it's an embarrassment to be tied with someone else. It is truly an embarrassment. It should not even be a conversation, because we really build solidarity among working people. We know that the environment is wrong. We know that to label the Cuban government as terrorist is wrong. When we see even Cuban missions coming to the west side of the city of Chicago, when our own government have not talked to this, to the poorest areas of the city. So how can we label terrorists? The terrorism and the bombs are being financed by our own government.
That's right.
And we must take a stance. So that's why in the city council, we are proud to have the first large city that called and voted in favor of ceasefire. And with the same passion and with the same commitment, we have introduced a resolution working the embassy of Cuba to take off Cuba off the terrorist list. And we're going to need every single one of you to help us organize. Because one thing I tell you that we have learned in Chicago, in that we're great organizers, in Cold partners. We have great union leaders here at SCIU and CTU. Today we have even UAW coming and demand the ceasefire. Labor have an important role to play. Because if we have working class people in true solidarity, we will understand that we cannot be free until Palestine is free, until Cuba is free, until Puerto Rico is free. And that's a fact. Now we look at different. I'm glad that we talk about the open veins in Latin America. So if you have a chance, read it, Eduardo Galeano. Great writing. And it's a funny writing, but it's really a hypocrisy that must be exposed. So when we talk about Latin America, and when we talk about an American continent, right? I love when you mentioned Simón Bolívar. And when we talk, and I'd like to take some of the phrases that are heard in the DNC, that no one person can define who is American, who is not. I agree. Because this is a large continent, and we are very American, even more American, South American, North American, very American. But yet, we continue to be treated as second-class citizens. And that's what is important, that we understand solidarity. And that is why, despite of all odds, that ceasefire was done because of the people. People movements, labor movements. We need labor, we need working people together. The DNC right now claims, they're proud of Chicago because we defend human rights, workers' rights, immigrant rights, reproductive rights, but not for everybody. The hypocrisy. The hypocrisy. So today I tell you, we must fight for the Cuban Revolution because that's fighting for history. If we talk about solidarity, who has stood for solidarity among working people, we cannot forget about Cuba. So I'm inviting you, every single one of you, just like we did with the ceasefire. We need to take Cuba off the terrorist list. So that is the first step to take off the food from the neck of our Cuban brothers, sisters, and siblings. Because that's what's happening today. And I invite every single one of you. Because when we do that, and when we finish, because apartheid states always fall. And they have fallen because of working people and international solidarity. And that's what we need to do today. And I have no doubt that the apartheid state in Israel will fall down. I got no doubt. And the suffering that we see today, and I just want to end with this. What we see, and we can go on and on about the 40,000 people that are being slaughtered, genocide, playing live TV. But we hear right here from a testimony with the little that the Cuban people have, the generosity and the courage that they have exemplified. And that's of course dangerous for a system that does not see human beings in everyone, but choose people who has now the right to live. That's what we need. So I tell you today, let's make a commitment to make this resolution that I hope that will be played in the next months a priority. Because when we win here in Chicago, we're not going to let others to manipulate the narrative. This is organizing. And this is organizing at the local level to think globally, to connect the struggles, to make sure that we connect our communities for a better world. We saw the images, and I end with this. I'm a father of triplets. I have twin girls and a boy, and I'm blessed. And I saw on live TV how a father of twins went to pick up the birth certificate of twin girls. When he came back to pick up the bodies of his wife and his 3 girls. That is what we see. So let's not be afraid of the reactionaries. They're wrong. Let's be afraid of having a world where that is normalized. And let's commit today for a world that we want to inherit the next generation, where we all see each other and each other's humanity. Human dignity is under attack. That is what we're under attack. And what we see today in the testimony about the generosity of the Cuban Revolution, about Cubans that are allowing doctors to come and be trained and go back to their communities to serve. That is not terrorism. That is what Chairman Ferragamo said. That is revolutionary law. And we got a lot to spread here in the city and a lot to be exemplified. And I'm proud to stand with Cuba, Puerto Rico, and Palestine. Proud, very proud to stand in solidarity. Let's be proud and let's put that in action. So let's make sure that we connect because this resolution is going to pass with your help. And let's make sure hasta la victoria siempre means always in solidarity. Always.
Thank you, Byron, for those powerful words. I just want to give a shout out to the group, because just right now we collected $619. I feel that's like a whole pacemaker and a little bit of more money for another one. So you guys should be proud. And for anyone online, I just realized we didn't give a website where you can donate at dhpartners.org/Cuba2024. And if you missed it, we have a bunch of ways to donate online. The buckets in there. Up next, I'm going to introduce another of our awesome speakers. We have Cody Irvin, who is the Vice Chairperson of the U.S. County Chapter of the International League of People's Struggle, also known as the ILPS. And he is also the Global Treasurer of the International Coordinating Committee of the ILPS. The ILPS is an international anti-imperialist and democratic alliance of nearly 400 members organizations in around 40 different countries, over 70 of those organizations being in the U.S. chapter. Please welcome Cody.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brenda. And thank you to all the speakers who came before me. I've been really inspired, really energized to fight to end the blockade of Cuba. Are y'all with me? Right. So thank you to the event organizers tonight for allowing the International League of People's Struggle to speak briefly. As Brenda said, my name is Cody, Vice Chairperson of the U.S. Country Chapter of the ILPS. And what the ILPS is we are a global alliance of many different organizations, almost 400 at this point, from around 40 different countries. And there's many points of unity that we have in our organizing, our fights together. But the one that really glues us all together is right there in our name. It's the PS in ILPS, People's Struggle. Now, what does that mean? And in terms of talking about what that means and how it relates to Cuba, I want to talk a bit about why we, the U.S. chapter of ILPS, is here in Chicago this week. So ILPS is a proud member of the coalition of art from the DNC, because when we look at the options that the people seem to be presented with for who to vote for, this is an illusion that this is an option between Republicans and Democrats. That's not the actual options that we should be given. For many working people, it's actually the option between paying for another term of school or going to the doctor. Or it's an option between paying rent or buying food. That's the kind of options that working people have. And so therefore, we can't actually vote in a better solution for us in our current system. It's something we have to fight for. It comes from the ground up and people build it together. And when you look at the history of the Cuban Revolution, and you look at the society that has been built, and everything, all the great examples of Cuba's immense solidarity that it has given the world, and the way that it serves its people, It's because it's a country that is built from the ground up. It's a country where people are bound together whenever there is a need. ILPS has been proud to have some of our members join on these delegations to Cuba, and I would recommend all of you go on. I'm hoping, I always say next year is gonna be the year that I go to Cuba. So if you can promise, if one of you in this room can go to make next year the first year you go to Cuba, I'll do my best to be there with you. We hosted our own delegations in the past to Cuba. And every time that we've done it, our members have gotten such immense lessons of solidarity. And so it's clear to us who the real terrorist is. Oftentimes when ILPS is taking to the streets, we have a chant that we often do that is US imperialist, #1 terrorist. We have a campaign within ILPS US called Defend People's Struggle. Because again, everywhere where there is oppression, the places where people have been able to free themselves has been through struggle. It's been through unity, and it's been through serving each other without any kind of expectation of returns. And that's the kind of spirit that it takes to win freedom. And so we know that's actually the biggest threats to an imperialist power like the US, is true, genuine solidarity and genuine people's struggle. So what that looks like for ILPS is it means that we are linking together and supporting each other's fights for freedom, whether it's at the community level, whether it is at freeing your entire country. There's many of our member organizations have been tagged as terrorists, either within the US itself or in their countries back home that they're fighting for their liberation overseas. And so to us, it's no different when Cuba is added to the state-sponsored list of terrorists. It is because Cuba is the threat to US imperialism. And if you ask me, a threat to US imperialism is one of my best friends. So I know I don't have much more time left up here to speak. And unfortunately, I actually have to, we have to run out shortly after this for an important meeting by organization. I won't have a lot of time to stay and speak with many of you, but I would encourage you all, if you can go to a very easy web domain, ilps.us, that's ilps.us. We'd love to get in contact with you. And again, we hope to have our members continue to join these delegations to Cuba. And regardless, whether it's next year, whether it's in 5 years, no matter how long it takes, the blockade of Cuba will end because solidarity can never be defeated. So thank you again, all power to the people, along with international solidarity. Cuba, sí. Right on. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you, Cody and ILPS for being here. Up next, I have the honor of introducing a coalition who has been working with us in solidarity since sort of the beginning in Los Angeles. And so we have Kabula Mutombo, who is one of the leading members of the African People's Socialist Party and the Uhuru movement. He is representing the Hands Off Uhuru Buyback Coalition, a non-sectarian anti-colonial free speech coalition of over 150 endorsing organizations and individuals who demand the U.S. government drop the bogus charges against Amali Yeshitela, the chairperson of the African People's Socialist Party, and 2 leaders of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, Penny Hess and Jesse Neville. For more information, you guys can visit handsoffuhuru.org. But here we have Kabula, who has the honor of speaking for a couple of minutes. And Allison will pull up your video. Do you want that first before you speak?
The video.
For sure. Allison, you can play the video first.
This is the FBI. You have a federal warrant for this address. Keep your hands up and follow orders. This is the FBI. We have a warrant for this.
They handcuffed me and my wife out here. They wanted me to sit on the curb while they were carrying this out, something that I refused to do. They wanted my wife to sit on the curb out here, that she refused to do.
As I was coming out, this big old drone met me.
The only revolutionary organization that's done something here on the ground practically for African people is the one that's come under attack. Institution that offers a community radio station, a newspaper, a commercial kitchen, an Aquaba Hall rental space, and community office for our organizers. That was the building that has come under attack.
Yeah, breach, what do you need? They want, I don't know. Go tell them that money. Don't take it.
We will build a movement of white people that says hands off the Uhuru movement.
They see in the African People's Socialist Party a vanguard for the struggle for the liberation of our people. They see that because not just what we do here in the United States, but because we had the temerity to do like Garvey, to do like Malcolm X, and take the struggle of black people around the world.
Harris is.
Okay, sorry about that, online people. We lost connection, but we're back, and Kabula just started speaking, so maybe, sorry, Kabula, if you want to start over.
Okay. Uhuru is the Swahili word for freedom. I'm Kabula Mutombo, and that on behalf of the Hands Off Uhuru Fight Back Coalition and Chair Boise Odom, I'm honored to be here to express our unity and solidarity with the Cuban Solidarity Movement, the labor movement. A special thank you to the National Cuba Solidarity Task Force for the invitation to speak. The Hands Off Uhuru Fight Back Coalition joins you condemning the vicious economic blockade imposed on Cuba by the U.S. government. We call for the removal of Cuba on the state sponsors of terrorism list, and we call for an immediate end to the U.S. government's fearless attacks against Cuban people. The Uhuru movement has always upheld the revolutionary example of the Cuban people in their government. We say hands off Cuba. 9 months after the July 2022 violent FBI raids on 7 Uhuru movement homes and offices, as seen in the video, the federal government indicted African People's Socialist Party Chairman Wally S. and Uhuru Solidarity leaders Penny has just example on bogus charges targeting solely their First Amendment right to free speech. If convicted, the Uhuru three face up to 15 years in prison. Chairman Omali S. is the primary target of these attacks. In the 1960s, he registered Black voters in Florida as a field organizer with student nonviolent coordinating. For the past 60 years, he has created programs for Black community education, food systems, healthcare, housing, and economic development.
the quote unquote evidence that the government decided that fabricated case includes the Uhuru movement, quote, making speeches and writing articles critical of the US government. Going to the UN and testifying that the US has committed genocide against African people. And running candidates for office on the platform of reparations. The Uhuru Three are preparing for the September 3rd trial that will set the precedent for future free speech for everyone. As we plan to win this fight for all freedom-loving people, your commitment to this fight back is a powerful part of our victory. You can go to handsoffuhuru.org for more information and sign up for the August 31st rally and the Uhuru 3 trial on September 3rd. You could also see the video footage of the July 29th FBI raids. Thank you so much. In the US blockade on Cuba, long live the Cuban Revolution. Drop the charges on the Uhuru 3, hands off Chairman Omali Taylor and Uhuru. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So before I introduce the next speaker, I want to share a solidarity message from Marilyn McKenna and Jonathan Gomez from the Chicago Religious Leadership Network. Oh, can you hear me? I'm sorry, I forgot it. Sorry. Okay, so this is a message from the Chicago Religious Leadership Network. We send our deepest gratitude to the organizers of this historic event, as well as all the panelists and audience in person and online. You know, many of you have worked tirelessly to end U.S. sanctions for many days. At CRLN, we have been fortunate to meet and work with Cuban faith leaders since 1996, when Reverend Raimundo Garcia, a Cuban Presbyterian pastor from Cardenas, Cuba, all on us between our two peoples, promote dialogue about U.S.-Cuba relations and to experience firsthand the impact of U.S. sanctions on Cuban people. Traveling to Cuba and hosting events in Chicago, we learned that U.S. sanctions have always been aimed at bringing hunger and desperation to Cuban people. We had to work to end this policy, which was being carried out in our name. Now, more than ever, we can see the result of the unrelenting U.S. sanctions on the Cuban people. We are all called to meet this moment by redoubling our efforts to remove Cuba from the U.S.-created state sponsors of terrorist list and lift all U.S. sanctions. We will organize side by side with all of you in all the phases where this work continues, inspired by Cuban people who continue to advance their vision of the future, no matter the obstacles we say. Adelante, CRLN, Jonathan and Marilyn. Our next speaker is somebody, well, it's kind of exciting in what's going on with labor and specifically labor's attention to Cuba. And the number of resolutions that have been recently passed over the past year, calling for the end of sanctions, the end of the U.S. embargo on Cuba, and to remove Cuba from the state-sponsored terrorist movement. There are over 40 resolutions passed, and most recently in California, the California Federation of Labor resolution to get Cuba off the terrorist list, and that Federation of Labor represents 2 million people. All this work was primarily organized by building relations with Cuban labor, which both organizes labor delegations, but the work of these labor resolutions has been spearheaded by Bill Kim and that organization, which they've done just terrific work, which cannot be, really underestimated, but it's just tremendous support in terms of building this movement and extending and reaching out into labor. So our next speaker has been on Cuba television with BWRC now, Joe Recker, who is the financial secretary of FAU 73, participated with on labor delegation in May Day this year. And he's going to share with us a little bit about, his experience, his observations, his interactions and discussions he had with Cuban organizations and Cuban people. And I know he is trying to and working on building more, extending more labor support area in the Chicago area. So I am proud to share the mic with Joe, and I welcome him, his brother and friend, Joe Rucker.
Good late evening. I'm humbled and honored to share this stage today with these fine speakers. I'm a storyteller. I'm going to tell you some stories, my experiences in Cuba. And we're not going to go deep into the weeds and not going to go deep into the facts and things like that. You all know those. If I'm in error in some of the things I say, it's not on purpose. I'm fairly new to this. Over the years, I read few books on Cuba, read some articles, saw some videos. I was intrigued about going to Cuba. The history, the architecture, the old cars, and communism. One of the experiences for my firsthand. And even, being forbidden to go to Cuba made it even more intriguing. I want to break through. So, let's go to Cuba with the co-building relations with Cuba delegation. I took it up. I took it upon myself to go. I was not sponsored with my union. I did it as Joe Richards, American citizen, whoever I am, just to go and see and witness this. And it was unbelievable. We visited Havana, Santiago, and Gitmo. It was a 9-day tour at Bill campus. Julie mentioned, and Nancy Yamada. They really filled me with a lot of good guys, and everybody else in the delegation really filled me with information. No, brought a lot of attention to so it was really appreciative of all of that. It was really interesting to find land in Cuba. Melanchon reminded me of Chicago, Lakeshore Drive, right? So right away. Hadn't seen that the Gulf, so it was really cool. We had a meeting with the architect and urban designer for developments in Cuba on the architecture and the city. We went on a tour of Old Havana, which is a UNESCO heritage site, which was really interesting. We visited the 4 major squares. The architecture of it was beautiful. I was really taken by that. And then it was on a side note. I didn't notice on my airline ticket, but there's a $25 or something, $29 fee on my airline. I didn't quite know what that was, and somebody in our group had a impacted tooth, and our guide turned around and said, "Oh, we'll get you to the dentist," and we'll get it all taken care of. So we went to the dentist's office, and they took care of his tooth, and they gave him some antibiotics, and it didn't cost him a dime. So we started talking about it. I'm like, they're like, "Oh, this was on your airline ticket." It's like, son of a gun, it's the first time, and that I had to go to Cuba to be covered by universal Medicare. It's like, this is really cool. So we went to Santiago. We met the historian there in office in a beautiful building that once housed a grammar school, and was sort of the Che and his brother went to school, and it was really impressive. The architecture, it was beautiful. And it was part of that history I really wanted to go see. It was really, Santiago was fantastic for that. We attended the May Day celebration in Havana, and we went to the International Conference on Labor Solidarity in Havana. It was wonderful to see all those labor people in one room from all over the world. The May Day event was something, it was, I don't want to say it was the main purpose to go there, but it was like one of those bucket list things. And to see the solidarity and to see the people and to just be part of that. We got at 4:30 in the morning to get in line and get in the parade, and I met Julie for the first time, and Steve, and then Rick. I can't remember Rick's last name. We started talking, and he was from Cicero, where I grew up,
So here I'm in Cuba meeting a guy that I never met before. So it's kind of interesting to see that. It was just really a fantastic day. I actually came within about 25 to 30 feet of Raul Castro, which was really cool to see him. It's again part of the story of Cuba. We also met members of the Cuban Workers Confederation. We discussed labor issues, and it was really interesting because I really had a hard time with that. I kept asking them, well, have the workers ever gone on strike? When do they go on strike? And, they tried to explain it to me, and it really took me a long time to wrap around that they were kind of bargaining with themselves. The Cuban workers bargaining with the Cuban government who are the workers. And, they don't need to strike because they do come to a resolution of their union contract, with their pay and their working conditions, they vote on it. Like we do here. They get a deal. They always work it out. So it was really interesting. It took me a little while to figure that all out and kind of put it into perspective. But they do have collective bargaining agreements. They do have a unified voice, working conditions in a union to do that. So it was really, the comparables are a little different, but it was still working people. It's really good to talk to them and to get their view of things. We also met the Federation of Cuban Women, who gave us insight into the political careers and backgrounds of women in the Cuban political system. And, it was really amazing to find that women hold a majority of the seats in our National Assembly of People Power. So women do play an important role in Cuba through their system, which I would never have imagined, except things I thought we didn't know. We also, one of the highlights for me was in Santiago, we met with Sensex, learned about the LGBTQ plus and new family in Cuba, constitution initiatives that they did, which guarantees same-sex marriage, gender equality, protection from violence and neglected children and the elderly, and abortion is readily accessible and free. So it's really, again, it was really interesting, and the embargo, say this a couple of times, it's really like seeped into every single aspect of their lives. One of the views from men having sex with men, having me economists, or have a good time and be protected with Cuba. I'm like, well, this is really crazy. Why are you handing this to me? You need it more than I do, first of all. And secondly, we brought a whole case. You can't get it there. Why would I take something that you have that we brought a bunch of that you need? And that was one thing that was really, I was really happy that these suitcases, medical supplies, vitamins, ballet shoes, all kinds of stuff that they can't get there. And it was really cool that we did that, and really, and they were very appreciative. We met children at school, they were blind and deaf kids in Santiago, and they came and they performed for us, and it was just fantastic. And the school was, pretty modern, it was pretty clean. And then they took us on a tour of this, and they're braille machines for 40 years old. They can't get the parts to fix them anymore. The paper that they use, they have to use all four sides to write for these kids to read, because paper is such a demand. Again, it's because of the embargo. There's another machine I wasn't quite sure what it was, but it was help visually impaired kids. They can't get parts for it anymore. It's so old, and they can't even get parts anymore to fix them. So these kids have to do without. It was sad because it was really non-materialistic, non-judgmental, very friendly. I mean, it was just unbelievable, the spirit at the school. And I was really surprised to see that it has a 98% literacy rate. So it's free education at all levels, as we heard earlier, the doctors. So it was really interesting about that. We did visit Elan, the Latin American Medical School. They talked about, the free medical school that they give, how they send the doctors abroad, how they assist. And the fact that I really have a doctor-patient ratio of 8.4 physicians for every 1,000 people. Here in the United States. So, and they go out and they help, and during COVID, they inoculated 10 million of their 12 million people. They sent their 5 different COVID vaccines throughout the world to assist in the third world countries. They ran out of syringes to do that. So they had to get syringes to help other people. Because they couldn't get syringes for themselves. And yet they sent that abroad and helped people abroad with the COVID. We visited and viewed performance
by both the Rosario Cardenas Dance Group and the National Ballet. So we gave them ballet shoes and they get paid to do this. So the commitment and dedication for them and the arts, was just fantastic. The music, I never been to Cuba, and the jazz clubs are fantastic. We had a private rooftop performance by, I don't know if everybody's heard of him, but he's pretty famous, Pablo Mendez, and the group is all of it. But he did a little concert for us, all of us in the roof of his house. He's like, I'm not doing this gig because I have to make rent or anything. I'm doing this gig because I love labor and I love what you guys doing for Cuba. So I'm performing. It was a great concert. If you walk through his house, it's the only story about him performing with Santana and other people. His mom defected to Cuba. He was American originally. He defected to Cuba and when he was 13. Barbara Bird, I think was her name. She was a jazz singer from the 70s from Detroit. So I kind of looked up some of her music. It's an interesting story, to say the least, but the music was fantastic. We met with a filmmaker, Gloria Rolando, and she had a short film on African Cuban women. It was really interesting. And then we went to Casa Casada. Right. So thank you. I'm a white guy. I don't speak very good Spanish. I don't speak very good. So I try my best. If I don't intend to offend anybody with my fishery language. But we also went to the African Culture Center, and they illustrated this how African Cubans played a major role in developing that country. So it was really cool to get that perspective. The one story that really stands out, I visited a senior center, and there's probably about 70 seniors in the center. Everybody had their little rocking chair, they had a little TV, and they had the fans going, and everything was really cool. And one of the people from our delegation went to the bathroom, and the woman attendant handed her, handed it back to the attendant. About 10 minutes went by, one of the seniors got up and she went to the bathroom, they handed her a piece of newspaper. I'm like, oh, it's really, excuse my French, it's not bad, right? I mean, here you got toilet paper, you give her, why are they giving her newspaper? So after it was over, why did she get newspaper? And she said, well, we only have one roll of toilet paper and we use that for our guests. So again, blockade and the ability to get just simple things like toilet paper that we take for advantage every day. Really, we were at a restaurant one night, I was with 2 other union people, and they asked for a bottle of ketchup and fries. The bartender waiter laughs. Yeah, we haven't had. Same thing with Tabasco, another restaurant. The Tabasco bottle ran out, yes or no, and I ain't gonna see another one of those weeks. Simple. So went to a small corner store one day, and we walked in the store, kind of like 7-Eleven, you're not very big, and walked in the store and they had 2 sleeves, you get the box of crackers and they had 4 sleeves inside the box, so they had like maybe 5 or 6 little sleeves, about 5 or 6 sleeves of cookies, a bottle of cases of water, a couple cases of soda, and a big hunk of meat. That was it. It's like, how do you, what do you have here? I go, this is it. So it was really eye-opening for me. And food, it's not only food, I heard about the pastries, I talked a little bit about braille machines, condoms, vitamins, feminine products, the list goes on. Everything that we take for granted. So I didn't, I want to reaffirm the art, the music, that's fantastic. If you have a chance to go, that. The food was unbelievable. The food just tastes so different. It's in the United States. The chicken has such a taste. And you go to the restaurant, the menu, they give you a menu, but then you order something, it's we don't have that today, it's only this. And we went to a restaurant twice, and one day they had chicken and no beef, and the next day, yeah, it's chicken again, I don't know, we got beef today. So it just depends what they can get. The rest of the stuff on the menu they didn't have. So, the embargo is there. It's been there for 65 years. They're labeled as a state-sponsored terrorism. How can they be with all these? And then the reason, I'm not going to get into the reason. We all know what the reasons are why that's there. But it was a long time ago. These people have developed
That's children die because they don't have medications, they don't have adults die because they don't have pacemakers, medications they need. The bottom line is what we have. Labor has, who's solving a lot of the problems, who's worked really hard to change things in the United States, that's labor. And this group was basically from California. So when I came in, went to my union and had talked to the president about this guy, and Paul, was fantastic leader here in Chicago. She fights for social justice for members. I said, Diane, I have to do this. I said, I'm really moved. I said, I really want to do it. She's laughing. So when you came back from Africa, you want to do the same thing. And that kind of petered off a little bit. I said, Africa is 9 hours away by plane. Cuba is 90 miles. This is our neighborhood. These are our neighbors. These are our fellow union people. And she's like, you're right. We tried to do a resolution about 5 years ago with our institute, and we met a lot of resistance. So we were both nervous. We're electing this year, our election this week. And she said, let's take it to the equal. So we went to the executive board, and it's 35-0 vote to let me come out and speak as Joe Richard, Secretary Treasurer of SCA Global School. Really proud of our executive board. I'm really proud of the leadership of Local 73. I am going to work really hard to all pass resolutions, do whatever is necessary to put the pressure on the government to make these decisions to do the right thing for Cuba. I don't know, I'm totally sold on communism as politics. If you see touched on it, you don't need to be a communist. So I don't know if I'm sold on it. You can't even make a decision on it because of it. It has literally seen this way to every aspect of the lives. Farming, you can't get the parts that you need from the tractors. In Santiago, I don't know if I said, I kind of not even looking at my nose because it's so these stories. Santiago, it was just power with them. They didn't have so much with you. Power with you. Sit in Santiago, eat breakfast, all some power. Like, oh, it's off. What's going to be off? You don't know. It could be anywhere from 3 to 7 hours, but it was every day, different times of the day, and you would just be living your normal life in power. Settings, no access to internet, no power, no air conditioning. And those are things, like I said, that we here in the United States that they struggle with. So I'm going to do my best. Because I'm new to this, and I might not get everything, all the facts right and everything. I'm going to get them right, and we're going to do what's right. We're going to try to organize labor to work with the coalition to make sure these embargoes and that the state-sponsored territory gets lifted from Cuba because they are our neighbors. They're just like us. And we're going to fight for what's right, fight for everybody, because don't will you come after us, guys. Thank you.
Thank you for trying to rally the troops here. I know it's getting late, but we have a few quick solidarity messages, and we want to start, like I said in the beginning, because we have a very wide breadth of people who have been part of this fight to end the blockade. And we want to bring up somebody who's been active in the Chicago abortion for Chicago for abortion rights, and also a long time labor activist, Linda Lowe, who's going to give a few minutes for
I just struck a few lines because the last speaker was so powerful. Greetings from Chicago for abortion rights. It's an important week in Chicago. Many new and young activists have been taking to the streets denouncing U.S. government policy, foreign and domestic. The Cuban people are no strangers to taking on the U.S. government, nor fighting back with their most powerful weapon, solidarity with the best people everywhere. As a feminist and a fighter for full reproductive justice in the United States, where despite spending billions on genocide in Gaza and other destructive policies around the globe, the highest infant and maternal mortality and morbidity rates in the so-called advanced world. We don't have to look far to see a society that puts feeding its population, providing healthcare for all, and extraordinary progress brought by the democratically planned and implemented historic family code that includes legal and free abortion, gender affirming care, rights of children and seniors, and so much more. We can learn a lot from the Cuban people. All this even with 60+ years of inhumane blockade. Imagine how much more Cuba can do for its own population and in solidarity with people struggling for rights throughout the world, including in the United States, when the embargo is lifted and trade and travel are unrestricted and Cuba is removed from the list of state-sponsored terrorists. Let's embrace Cuban solidarity and respond with our own solidarity with Cuba. End the blockade, Cuba sí, bloqueo no, viva Cuba, viva Palestina, viva las feministas, and all those fighting for justice all over the world. Thank you.
Thank you, and I know we already ran past our time, so I just want to say sorry to Robespierre Nunez, who's here for the DSA. They're supposed to have some minutes. We can't, but please talk to Robespierre afterwards. So I'll introduce our last speaker. This is Justine from the Amazon Labor Union. Yeah, Justine also came with us and is native to Cuba, which I'm sure she'll share some of that.
Thank you. Hi, comrades. Sorry, let me just, I don't want to, we're already running long. So. Yes, Amazon Labor Union has been active in the Cuba Solidarity Movement since our inception 3 years ago. Amazon workers and ALU leaders, ALU IBT leaders in New York City have participated in community demonstrations against the U.S.'s criminal economic warfare on Cuba and the state-sponsored terror designation. We've joined the yearly UN vote against the blockade, and we have made solidarity trips to Cuba. This May Day, as Brenda said, a dozen Amazon workers participated in a delegation of labor and youth activists visiting Havana, organized by U.S. Hands Off Cuba. The delegation delivered over 50 bags of medical supplies to the hospitals there, crucial supplies that are blocked by the sanctions. We also had the opportunity to meet and talk with union workers in factories and hotels, and needless to say, the trip was life-changing for all the Amazon workers who were visiting Cuba for the first time. We are planning another larger delegation of Amazon workers next year to bring whatever help we can and to build and foster stronger international labor and working class connections. In ALU IBT, we recognize that solidarity must be international. We are proud to fight in this struggle, and we will keep working to grow the labor movement's involvement in the Cuba Solidarity Movement. It will take a mass movement to end the U.S.'s terroristic sanctions on Cuba. And as a Cuban American myself, I thank you all from the bottom of my heart, for being here and for your work that you're doing to grow this movement. Together, we will end this blockade. You will see. Okay.
Thank you so much, Justine. And thank you to all our wonderful speakers today. Thank you to all of you for being here and minding our technological difficulties and our overtime here. And so I just want to end by saying, get involved. It's wonderful to know about these things, but things don't change unless we do something with that information. So there's like QR codes around on the tables where you can sign up for the next planning meeting for the Chicago committee specifically. If you're interested in other committees, you can follow U.S. Hands Off Committee online for Los Angeles and Cleveland. And if there's not a committee near you, reach out to one of us so we can help you start one. We want to encourage everyone to do actions around the United Nations voting that happens every year. And so we encourage you guys to get a group of people together and go make some noise outside some federal buildings or Cuban embassy, wherever you're at. And lastly, if you want to connect with people a bit more, I invite everyone to go over to the Skylark Bar that's like a block down, and y'all can continue to mingle and know each other. Thank you so much for coming. Who wants to go? Thank you. Skylark, it's